Can you truly imagine a moment so utterly transformative that it rends the very fabric of your perception, leaving behind not just a new perspective, but a new being? It's a whisper in the vast, echoing chamber of history, a question that lingers, softly, just at the edge of your consciousness, inviting you to lean in closer, to listen. What if the most profound change in a man's life came not from a fervent prayer whispered in the quiet of a temple, nor from a thunderous command on a battlefield, but from a piercing cry, a final wrenching gasp under a sky that had suddenly, inexplicably, begun to bleed twilight? Tonight, as the world outside settles into its gentle rhythm, and the shadows lengthen, inviting the calm embrace of sleep, we are going to embark on a journey, not through bustling cities or vibrant empires, but into the quiet inner landscape of a man whose life was irrevocably altered by a single unforgettable afternoon. Imagine, if you will, the weight of a Roman centurion's armor, not just the cold, hard metal plates resting against the warmth of his skin, or the sturdy leather straps that bound him in purpose, but the invisible burden of 100 crucifixions. Can you feel it pressing down on your shoulders? That cumulative chill, the faint, lingering echo of so many dying breaths he'd witnessed, so many last sighs that had drifted past his ears, unheard and unremarked until this one? It's a weight that settles, deep and ancient, into the bones of a man who has lived too long with death as his constant companion. We step back in time, not to the grand marble-floored halls of emperors where power was wielded like a sharpened blade, nor to the bustling, aromatic marketplaces of ancient cities overflowing with the vibrant chaos of life. No, our destination tonight is a place far more stark, far more silent. A desolate hill, windswept and barren, just outside the formidable gates of Jerusalem. A place known in hushed tones as Golgotha, the place of the skull. A name that speaks of finality, of endings. But sometimes, dear listener, sometimes endings are merely beginnings in disguise. Seeds buried deep beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to sprout. I want you to envision it with me now, gently, without strain, letting the details form softly, like mist gathering over an ancient landscape. The air itself seems thick, heavy with the fine dust of the Roman road, stirred by the occasional restless shuffle of feet, and the unspoken tension that hums low beneath the surface of a crowd hushed by a morbid, almost primal fascination. A strange quiet, broken only by the distant caw of a bird or the rustle of a garment. And above it all, etched against the bruised, darkening canvas of the late afternoon sky, 3 figures hang. 3 broken forms, testament to the brutal efficiency of Roman justice. But one of them is different. You can feel it, can't you? Even from a distance, even through the hardened, almost calloused eyes of a man who has witnessed too much suffering to be easily moved, there is an unsettling dignity radiating from him. A quiet strength, a profound composure that cuts through. The despair, like a single unwavering candle flame in a vast, encroaching darkness. You can almost feel it, that subtle emanation, a warmth that defies the chill of the dying day. As a centurion, my life, my very existence, was meticulously forged in the unyielding fires of discipline and absolute obedience. My gaze, honed by countless battles where life hung by a thread, and countless executions where it snapped in an instant, was accustomed to finding weakness, to observing the unraveling of the human spirit in its final desperate moments. I knew the signs of fear, the contortions of agony, the desperate pleas for mercy that never came. But this man, he defied every expectation, shattered every preconceived notion I held about what it meant to face death. There was no desperate plea from his lips, No bitter curse hurled at his tormentors. None of the frantic, animalistic struggle I had grown so accustomed to seeing. Just a profound silence, a stillness that was more unsettling, more disquieting than any scream I had ever heard. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a stillness that held an entire universe of unspoken truth. You see, you and I, we've perhaps only imagined this scene, heard tales of it whispered through the centuries, seen its echoes in art and literature. But to truly stand there, under that strange, heavy sky, feeling the fine, gritty dust of Golgotha beneath your sandals, hearing the low, murmuring hum of the restless crowd, a sound like a distant, troubled sea. It was something else entirely. It was a tableau that etched itself onto the very soul, demanding attention, drawing the eye, demanding to be witnessed, even from a hardened Roman soldier whose heart had long since learned to wall itself off from such spectacles. And I, Longinus, the centurion on duty, stood there, a silent sentinel, tasked with the grim duty of ensuring his death. A simple, brutal command, given without thought, executed without question. Yet, as the long, agonizing hours dragged on, and the last vestiges of light began to fade from the western sky, something within me, something deep and long buried beneath layers of cynicism and duty, began to stir. A faint vibration, almost imperceptible at first, like a distant tremor far beneath the Earth's surface, hinting at a seismic shift, an upheaval about to take place within the very foundations of my world. The air grew colder with each passing minute, a chill that was not merely a physical cold, but of something far deeper, far more spiritual. A shiver, not from the wind, but of profound, unspoken wonder, began to trace its path down my spine, chilling me to the very core. The kind of shiver that whispers of ancient secrets untold, of profound truths about to be unveiled, truths that would reorient my entire existence. And all I could do, all I was compelled to do, was watch. Watch this man, this silent man. His presence, even in unimaginable agony, was magnetic, an irresistible force pulling at the very fabric of my hardened resolve, unraveling it thread by quiet thread. The dignity in his suffering, the unwavering composure in the face of such cruelty, was a riddle I could not solve, a mystery I could not ignore. You feel that too, don't you? That subtle tug, that quiet curiosity that draws you ever closer to the mysterious edges of the unknown, to the places where the ordinary dissolves into the extraordinary. That's where we're going now, deeper into the heart of that ancient afternoon, where a transformation was about to begin. A change so profound it would resonate through the ages, not just for one man, but for all of history. Close your eyes, if you haven't already. Let the sounds of your world gently recede, fading like distant echoes, and allow yourself to drift, to simply listen as the story of Longinus, the centurion of Golgotha, slowly, serenely unfolds. Each word, each image, designed to cradle you in its gentle embrace, guiding you further into the quiet depths of your own rest. The air, once thick with the unspoken tension of the crowd, now began to feel thinner, almost brittle, as if stretched taut over an abyss of silent judgment. You could almost hear the rustle of robes, the shifting of sandaled feet, a symphony of discomfort and curiosity. As a centurion, my life was a relentless exercise in observation, in categorizing the dying, in cataloging their final moments. Yet this man, suspended between earth and sky, defied all categories. He was silent, and his silence was louder, more penetrating than any shout, any curse, any desperate plea I had ever witnessed. It was a silence that echoed, resonating deep. within the hidden chambers of my own being, a place I rarely dared to visit. Before he was brought to Golgotha, I had seen him briefly in the governor's courtyard. Pontius Pilate, a man whose authority was absolute, yet whose hands, even then, seemed to be washing away a truth he couldn't grasp. You could feel the unspoken words hanging in the air, the accusations hurled at him like stones, sharp and unforgiving. He claims to be King of the Jews. They roared, their voices a discordant chorus of fury. He incites rebellion. And yet, he stood there, this man, before Pilate, a figure of serene stillness amidst the storm. There was no defense, no frantic denial, no desperate attempt to plead his case. Just that profound, unwavering silence. It was baffling, truly. Every prisoner, every man facing the brutality of Roman justice, would fight, would argue, would scream. But not him. His eyes, though weary, held a depth I couldn't fathom, a quiet knowledge that seemed to transcend the petty squabbles of men. It was as if he knew something we didn't, something that made all the accusations, all the shouts, utterly meaningless. This quiet defiance, this refusal to engage in the charade, was a challenge, a subtle taunt to the very foundations of Roman power that I, as a soldier, had always believed to be unshakable. And I watched. You would have watched too, wouldn't you? Drawn in by the sheer anomaly of it all, that magnetic pull of something entirely new, entirely unexpected. Then came the scourging, a necessary brutality, a prelude to the final act. We, soldiers, were instruments of this process, our muscles conditioned, our minds hardened to the task. The whip, a fearsome thing, designed to tear flesh, to break spirits. It was a sound I knew intimately, the sickening thud of leather on skin, followed by the strained gasps, the cries of pain. It was meant to elicit submission, to drain the last vestiges of defiance from a condemned man. But even then, as the whips whistled through the air and met their mark, he endured it with a stoicism that bordered on the surreal. His body, already weakened, bore the terrible blows without a single cry, without a whimper that would satisfy the bloodlust of the onlookers. Just a quiet groan, perhaps a barely perceptible shift of weight, but no sound of surrender. It was as if his spirit remained untouched, hovering above the suffering, observing it with a detached compassion. The shadows in the courtyard seemed to deepen around him, clinging to the raw wounds, but they couldn't obscure the strange light that still emanated from his core. I remember the murmurs among my fellow soldiers, hardened men like myself. A flicker of unease, a glance exchanged, a subtle shift in their posture. They had seen countless floggings, inflicted countless blows, but this one was different. This man was not breaking. He was simply enduring. And in that endurance, there was a power that felt more profound than any military might, more unsettling than any defiant shout. It was a power that whispered not of revolt, but of revelation. And then, the mockery. After the scourging, the soldiers, bored by the silent suffering, sought entertainment. They stripped him, draped him in a scarlet robe, a crude parody of royalty. They placed a crown of thorns upon his head, sharp points digging into his scalp, beads of crimson welling up against the stark white of his brow. They knelt before him, spitting, slapping, sneering. "Hail, King of the Jews!" The air was filled with their harsh laughter, a brittle sound that grated on the senses. Yet, through it all, he remained silent. His eyes, though clouded with pain, held no anger, no resentment, only a profound, aching sorrow. It was a sorrow that seemed to encompass not just his own suffering, but the blindness of those who mocked him. This was not the defiance of a rebel, nor the terror of a common criminal. This was something entirely new, something I, Longinus, had never encountered in my long years of duty. It was as if he was observing them, these tormentors, with an understanding that transcended their cruelty, their ignorance. And in that moment, as the sun climbed higher, casting long, stark shadows across the courtyard, I felt a tremor, a faint, almost imperceptible crack begin to form in the armor of my own hardened heart. A tiny fissure, allowing a sliver of unexpected light to penetrate. The mockery continued, a cruel ritual, until it was time for the final march, the journey to Golgotha. Each step was an effort, each breath a struggle. The weight of the cross, beam, rough and unyielding, pressed against his raw shoulders. He stumbled, he fell, and we, the instruments of his fate, forced him onward. But even then, amidst the dust and the sweat and the humiliation, that quiet dignity remained. It was a flickering flame that refused to be extinguished, casting its gentle, persistent glow even on the darkest path. And as we made our way through the narrow, crowded streets of Jerusalem, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease, a premonition that this day, his execution, was unlike any other. It wasn't just a man dying. It was something more, something profound, something that would ripple through the very fabric of existence. And my role in it, once so clear, so simple, began to feel heavier, more significant than just a duty, more like a destiny dot as you drift now. Let these images gently fade into the background of your mind. The sounds, the sights, the subtle emotions. Let them become whispers on the wind, carrying you deeper into a peaceful slumber. The story continues, but for now, just rest. The march to Golgotha was a blur of dust and the rhythmic thud of Roman sandals on stone, interspersed with the shuffling feet of the condemned and the murmur of the crowd. Yet amidst that chaos, a single, unwavering image remained etched in my mind, and perhaps now, in yours. The man, still silent, still dignified, even as the raw wood of the cross chafed his lacerated skin. His journey was a torment, each stumble an agony, each breath a struggle against the relentless pull of exhaustion and pain. We, the legionnaires, were the inexorable force driving him forward, instruments of an empire that knew only command and consequence. But even then, amidst the dirt and the sweat and the ultimate humiliation, that quiet dignity remained not. It was a flickering flame. You see, a delicate light that refused to be extinguished by the rising wind of cruelty. It cast its gentle, persistent glow even on the darkest path, illuminating something within me that I had long believed to be dead, or perhaps had never truly existed. As we moved through the narrow, crowded streets of Jerusalem, a city humming with the Passover pilgrimage, a strange sense of unease began to settle over me. It was a premonition, a deep, unsettling feeling that this day, this specific execution, was utterly unlike any other I had ever overseen. It wasn't just a man dying. It was something more. Something profound was unfolding, something that would ripple through the very fabric of existence, touching every soul, even yours, even mine, across the vast expanse of time. And my role in it, once so clear, so brutally simple, began to feel heavier, more significant than just a duty performed, more like a destiny unfolding, silently, relentlessly. Finally, we reached the summit of Golgotha. The air here was thinner, more exposed, carrying the scent of dust and something metallic, something that spoke of old blood. The sun, though still in the sky, seemed to have lost its brilliance, casting a muted, almost mournful light over the scene. The crosses were erected, stark wooden silhouettes against the somber sky. The process was familiar to me, routine, almost mechanical. The nailing, the hoisting, the screams that usually accompanied it were absent from him. Again, that unsettling. Silence. Only a grunt of pain, a soft exhalation as the nails pierced flesh, but no cry of surrender. And as he was lifted, suspended there, between earth and heaven, something shifted in the atmosphere itself. The sky, which had been merely bruised, now began to darken with an unnatural swiftness. A profound gloom descended, not merely the shadow of evening, but a palpable darkness that felt as if the very sun had hidden its face in sorrow. It was disorienting, chilling. You could feel the unease spread through the crowd, a collective gasp, a murmuring that grew from whispers to a low, troubled hum. Even my hardened soldiers, men who had faced down countless horrors without flinching, cast nervous glances at the sky, then at each other. Their faces, usually impassive, now showed faint traces of apprehension. And through it all, he remained, hanging there, silent. He spoke only a few words, whispered words, almost lost on the wind, but each one carried a resonance that pierced deeper than any spear. Words of forgiveness. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Can you imagine uttering such words in such a moment, from such a place of unimaginable agony? It was incomprehensible. My mind, trained in the brutal logic of conquest and punishment, struggled to process such a concept. Forgiveness, for those who inflicted such pain, it was alien. It was divine. I stood there, observing, my hand resting instinctively on the hilt of my sword, a habit of comfort in a world suddenly devoid of familiar certainties. The darkness deepened, swallowing the distant hills, making the figures on the crosses seem to float in a void. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence. It felt as if the very ground beneath our feet was holding its breath, waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know. My training offered no explanation for this. My experience offered no precedent. There was only the chilling sensation of something vast, something ancient, something sacred unfolding before my very eyes. A mystery so profound it bent the very rules of the universe I thought I understood. And I, Longinus, the hardened centurion, found myself inexplicably, undeniably, caught in its silent, terrifying embrace. The world was tilting, not physically, but spiritually, and I was falling slowly, inextricably, into an abyss of revelation. Yourself drift now, dear listener, into the deepening quiet. Let the gentle hum of the unseen, the weight of the ancient air, lull you into a state of profound peace. The story continues to unfold, but for now, surrender to the calm, to the quiet, to the silent promise of rest. The deepening gloom that had swallowed the sun was not merely an illusion, not simply the natural progression of day into twilight. It was something far more profound, a tangible shift in the very fabric of existence. You could feel it, couldn't you? That subtle pressure in the air, a sense of vast, unseen forces gathering. As the minutes stretched, heavy and laden, a low rumble began to build deep within the earth itself. It was a sound that began as a faint vibration, barely perceptible. A tremor felt more in the soles of your feet than heard with your ears. But it grew, steadily, inexorably, into a profound guttural roar. Then the ground beneath us began to heave. Gently at first, a soft swaying that felt almost like the deck of a ship on a calm sea, then growing with terrifying swiftness into a violent, convulsive tremor. The rocks of Golgotha, ancient and seemingly immutable, groaned under the strain, tearing open with jagged, gaping mouths. dust billowed upwards, choking the air, mingling with the deepening darkness, creating a scene of terrifying primal chaos. My soldiers, hardened by battle, accustomed to the shocks of war, faltered. Their disciplined ranks broke as they instinctively sought balance, their faces etched with a fear I had rarely seen. A fear born not of man, but of the very earth turning against them. We had faced armies, faced storms, but this was different. This was the world itself crying out, reacting to something profound, something cosmic, that was unfolding on that desolate hill. And in that moment of raw, untamed power, as the earth trembled and the sky wept darkness, an unimaginable event occurred, miles away, yet intrinsically linked to the terror on Golgotha. Within the sacred confines of the temple in Jerusalem, a place of profound holiness, of hushed reverence, where only the high priest was permitted to enter the innermost sanctuary once a year. The great veil, a thick, heavy curtain woven with intricate designs, separating the holy place from the Holy of Holies, the very dwelling place of God's presence, was violently, unequivocally torn in two, from top to bottom, as if by an unseen hand of immense power, ripping it apart with a sound that, though unheard by us on the distant hill, must have echoed with the force of thunder through the hushed halls of the temple. Imagine the priests performing their ancient rituals, their faces solemn and intent, suddenly confronted by this impossible, terrifying sight. The rending of the veil was not merely a tear in fabric. It was a tearing of the cosmic order, a shattering of the established barrier between the human and the divine. It signified a new access, a profound shift in the very relationship between humanity and the sacred. And though I did not witness this with my own eyes at that very instant, the sheer force of the earthquake, the undeniable reaction of the natural world around me, whispered of a tearing, a breaking, a fundamental change that permeated everything. It was as if the earth groaned in response to the tearing of that unseen veil, a sympathetic vibration echoing through the very bedrock of existence. My gaze, through the swirling dust and the unnatural gloom, remained fixed on him, the man on the central cross. He was no longer just a condemned criminal. He was the epicenter of this cosmic upheaval. His final breath, though a simple exhalation, seemed to unleash these forces. And as the earthquake reached its crescendo, as the ground bucked and swayed, a clear, unmistakable cry escaped his lips, cutting through the chaos, echoing in the profound silence that immediately followed the earth's convulsion. "It is finished," he cried, a declaration not of defeat, but of completion. A final, powerful assertion that reverberated through the very core of my being, resonating with a truth I could not yet name, but could undeniably feel. Then he breathed his last, and in that instant, an absolute silence descended. The earthquake ceased its furious dance. The wind died down. The dust began to settle, slowly, like a fine shroud. And the unnatural darkness, though still present, seemed to hold a different quality now, not one of impending doom, but of profound, sacred grief. It was as if the entire universe collectively held its breath, mourning, or perhaps witnessing something infinitely grander than any of us mortals could comprehend. It was. In this profound stillness, this hushed aftermath of chaos, that my own transformation began to crystallize. All the strange dignities, the unsettling silences, the inexplicable endurance, the words of forgiveness, the darkening sky, the tearing earth, they coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. A truth that, moments before, would have been blasphemy, lunacy, an outright rejection of everything I, a Roman centurion, had been taught. But now, in the face of such overwhelming evidence, of such cosmic grief and power, it was the only possible conclusion that my voice, usually rough with command, emerged from my throat, raw and unbidden, cutting through the stunned silence of the remaining crowd and my equally stunned soldiers. It was not a shout of triumph, nor a cry of despair, but a declaration born of absolute conviction. Truly, I heard myself proclaim, my words resonating with a certainty that shook me more than any earthquake. Truly, this man was the Son of God. It was a confession, a revelation, an admission of a truth that had been whispered to me by the very heavens, etched onto my soul by the dying breath of a man who was clearly, undeniably, more than just a man. The words hung in the air, simple, yet revolutionary, changing everything. My life, my understanding of the world, my very purpose, dissolved and reformed in that single, profound statement. And as the last echoes of my voice faded, I felt an indescribable peace begin to settle over the chaos, a quiet balm on my suddenly opened heart. Close your eyes now, if they are still open. Let the image of the trembling earth, the tearing veil, and the sudden, profound silence guide you deeper into the calming embrace of sleep. Feel the quiet certainty that permeates this space, a gentle whisper of peace that draws you further into your own restful depths. The story unfolds onward, but for now, just drift. The declaration, truly this man was the Son of God, echoed not just in the stunned silence of Golgotha, but within the very chambers of my own being. It was a truth that settled deep, resonating with a power far beyond any order I had ever given or received. Yet even amidst this profound realization, duty, a relic of my former self, still beckoned. We had to ensure death. It was the final grim task. My eyes, still somewhat clouded by the dust of the earthquake and a profound shift in my perception, fell upon the figure on the cross. He was still, silent. The battle-hard-made part of my mind registered the cessation of struggle, the slumped posture. But the newly awakened part of me, the part that had just spoken a truth that transcended my Roman world, yearned for certainty, for an undeniable sign. God, it was then that I reached for my spear, a familiar weight in my hand, cold and honed. This was not an act of cruelty, you understand, not anymore. It was an act of finality, of confirmation. A simple, necessary motion for a centurion on duty. I raised the spear, its tip glinting dulled in the ethereal gloom, and thrust it into his side. A precise, practiced motion. And from the wound, something utterly unexpected, something miraculous, flowed forth. Not just blood, thick and crimson, as one would expect from a mortal wound, but also water, clear and pristine, mingling with the rich red. Imagine it with me, softly. The sight of those two distinct streams, flowing together, a stark contrast against the pale, bruised skin. It was a visual paradox, a physical impossibility that defied all natural law, all the medical knowledge I possessed from countless battlefields. Blood, yes, but water? From a body that had endured such torment, dehydrated by hours on the cross? It was a sign, a vivid, undeniable confirmation, not just to my awakened spirit, but to my very senses, that this was no ordinary man. This was indeed the Son of God. A shiver, colder and more profound than any fear, yet filled with an indescribable peace, traced its way through me. And in that very instant, as the blood and water flowed, something else happened. Something deeply personal, intimately connected to the very core of my existence. My impaired vision, a persistent blur that had long troubled my left eye, a nuisance I had simply learned to live with, suddenly miraculously cleared. The world sharpened. The hazy edges of my sight dissolved, replaced by a clarity I hadn't known in years. The dust motes in the air, the jagged lines of the torn rocks, the weary faces of my soldiers, all sprang into sharp, vivid focus. It was as if a veil had been lifted not just from the temple, but from my own eyes. Can you feel that sensation? That sudden clarity, that moment when what was once obscure becomes undeniably clear? It was a physical manifestation of an internal awakening. My physical sight was restored, perfectly mirroring the spiritual revelation that had just flooded my soul. It was a moment of profound grace, a tangible blessing that sealed the truth I had just declared. The flow of blood and water, the restoration of my sight, they were not mere coincidences. They were divine affirmations, gentle whispers from the heavens, confirming that I was no longer just Longinus, the hardened centurion. I was Longinus, the witness. Longinus, the one who had seen, truly seen, and been touched by the divine. The silence that followed was absolute, no longer the troubled quiet of foreboding, but a hallowed stillness, pregnant with the weight of revelation. The other soldiers, still shaken by the earthquake, observed me with a mixture of confusion and awe. They had seen the spear. They had seen the flow. Perhaps they too felt the subtle shift in the air, the weight of a moment that transcended their understanding. But for me, it was a seismic shift, an unshakable certainty. My faith, born in that moment of cosmic upheaval, forged in the depths of sorrow and witnessed by the very elements, was solidified. It was no longer a nascent whisper, but a roaring flame, burning bright and clear in the quiet chambers of my transformed heart as the last light of that extraordinary day faded into the true darkness of night. I stood there, a different man on a different earth. The weight of my armor, once a symbol of duty and power, now felt heavy with a new kind of purpose. The sounds of Golgotha, once filled with cries and jeers, now echoed with a profound silence, broken only by the gentle rhythm of my own breathing. Let yourself sink deeper into this peaceful silence now, dear listener. Feel the quiet certainty, the gentle flow of tranquility as you drift towards a restorative, dreamless sleep. The darkness that enveloped Golgotha after that extraordinary afternoon was unlike any night I had ever known. It wasn't merely the absence of light, but a profound, almost sacred quiet, teeming with the echoes of revelation. My armor, once a comforting shell of identity and purpose, now felt like a heavy, ill-fitting burden. The clanking of metal, the familiar weight of my shield, the grip of my sword, they were no longer symbols of strength, but reminders of a world I no longer belonged to. You can almost feel that shift, can't you? That internal realignment when what once defined you suddenly falls away, leaving a silent, open space for something entirely new. My mind, once sharp and disciplined in the rigid protocols of the Roman legion, now swam with images. The dignity of the condemned man, the words of forgiveness, the darkening sky, the trembling earth, the tearing veil I had sensed more than seen, the miraculous flow of blood and water, and the sudden, breathtaking clarity of my own sight. Each image, each sensation, wove itself into an undeniable tapestry of truth, a truth that contradicted every lesson, every belief, every God I had ever served. And yet, it resonated with a purity, a certainty that whispered deep into the newly awakened core of my being. The days that followed were a blur of internal turmoil, a silent battle waged within the confines of my own soul. The outer world continued its relentless rhythm. Orders were given, duties performed, but I moved through them like a ghost, an observer in my own life. My fellow soldiers, oblivious to the seismic shift that had occurred within me, continued their routines, their concerns mundane and familiar. But I saw them through new eyes, eyes that had witnessed the divine, eyes that now perceived a deeper reality. Their laughter, their boasts, their casual cruelties, they now seemed hollow, distant, like echoes in an empty hall. You might ask yourself, what does a hardened centurion do when his entire worldview shatters? When the very foundations of his loyalty, his purpose, crumble beneath the weight of an undeniable personal revelation? The answer, for me, came with a quiet, resolute certainty. I could no longer be what I was. The armor, the sword, the command, they were no longer mine to wield in good conscience. My allegiance had shifted, not to an earthly emperor, but to the Son of God I had just witnessed die, and in doing so, had truly seen for the first time. The decision was not made lightly. Resigning from the Roman army was not simply a matter of handing in one's equipment. It was a renunciation of status, of security, of the only life I had ever known. It carried with it the unspoken threat of suspicion, of being deemed a deserter, perhaps even a traitor. But the truth that burned within me was far more compelling than any earthly consequence. It was a call, clear and resonant, beckoning me away from the well-trodden paths of power and into the uncharted wilderness of faith. Imagine the feeling of shedding that heavy armor for the last time. The physical relief, yes, but more profoundly, the spiritual liberation. Each piece removed was a step away from my old self, a conscious unburdening. The helmet, no longer shielding my head from blows, but opening my mind to new thoughts. The breastplate, no longer protecting my heart, but leaving it vulnerable, open to the transformative power of love and compassion I had witnessed on the cross. The sword, once an instrument of death, now laid aside, a symbol of a different kind. Of battle I was prepared to fight. I became, in essence, a ghost to my former life. I slipped away quietly, without fanfare, without drawing undue attention. The precise details of my departure remained shrouded, for such things were best done in the shadows, away from the prying eyes of an empire that brooked no dissent, no unexpected conversions among its most loyal servants. It was a conscious choice to step into the unknown, to embrace a path unseen, guided only by the burning certainty of my newfound faith. Where did I go first? The immediate aftermath was a time of seeking, of quiet contemplation. I sought out those who had followed him, those who had grieved him, those who spoke of him with reverence and love. I listened. I learned. I absorbed every word, every memory. Like a parched man drinking from a fresh spring, you can almost feel that thirst, that deep yearning for understanding, for connection, that arises when your entire spiritual landscape has been rearranged. This was the beginning of my new life, not as a soldier of Rome, but as a silent, humble follower of the man I had once guarded on a cross. It was a profound pivot, a complete reorientation of my existence, driven by a truth so undeniable it transcended fear, transcended consequence. And as you feel yourself drifting now, dear listener, let the image of that shedding, that quiet release of the old self, carry you deeper into a peaceful, unburdened sleep. The journey is just beginning. The world outside the gates of Jerusalem stretched vast and unknown, yet it no longer felt daunting. After shedding the heavy mantle of my former life, a profound lightness settled within me, a sense of liberation I had never known. You can almost feel that freedom, can't you? The quiet joy of stepping onto a path less traveled, guided not by duty or command, but by an inner compass newly aligned with a truth that sang in my soul My journey began with a gentle wandering, a quiet seeking of those who had known him best. His followers, a small band of humble men and women, were scattered, grieving, yet holding on to a fragile hope. I found them, one by one, drawn by an invisible thread, a shared resonance in the air that only those who had been touched by his presence could feel. They spoke of him, not with the formality of a Roman record, but with the heartfelt intimacy of personal experience. And I, Longinus, once a silent observer of death, now became a rapt listener to life, to stories of healing, of wisdom, of a love that defied all earthly understanding. As I listened, a new purpose began to bloom within me. The truth I had witnessed on Golgotha, the truth that had shattered my old world and restored my sight, could not remain unspoken. It demanded to be shared, to be whispered into the hearts of those who yearned for something more, something real, amidst the clamor and the illusion of the world. My voice, once accustomed to barking commands, now found a new cadence, a softer tone, filled with the resonance of profound conviction. I began my journey of proclamation, not with the pomp of a Roman orator, but with the quiet sincerity of a man who had seen the unbelievable. My path led me to distant lands, to regions like Cappadocia, with its otherworldly landscapes of fairy chimneys and ancient cave dwellings, and to Caesarea, a bustling Roman port city, a melting pot of cultures and beliefs. Imagine walking those dusty roads under the vast, ancient sky, your only companions, the soft whisper of the wind and the unshakable certainty in your heart. My method was simple, yet profoundly effective. I spoke not of abstract philosophies or religious dogmas, but of what I had seen, what I had felt, what I had known. My testimony was raw, personal, unvarnished. I was there, I would say, my voice low and steady. I was the centurion who oversaw his crucifixion. I saw his dignity. I felt the earth tremble. I saw the blood and water flow. And my eyes, which were failing, were restored in that very moment. You can feel the weight of those words, can't you? The undeniable authority of a first-hand account, especially from one who was an instrument of the very power that condemned him. It was a testimony that cut through skepticism, that bypassed intellectual barriers, going straight to the heart. People listened. They gathered in hushed circles, their faces etched with a mixture of disbelief and growing hope. They had heard rumors, perhaps whispers of a new prophet, a new king. But to hear it from the very lips of a Roman centurion, a man who had stood at the foot of the cross, who had driven the spear, it was a different matter, entirely. My words were not designed to compel or to demand, but to invite. They were a gentle beckoning, a quiet stirring of the soul, much like the gentle breeze that whispers through ancient ruins, carrying secrets of ages past. I spoke of the man's compassion, his forgiveness, his profound love, even for those who tormented him. I painted a picture not of a conqueror, but of a redeemer. And as I spoke, I could see the light flicker in their eyes, the dawning of understanding, the softening of hardened hearts. Many were moved. They asked questions, their voices hesitant at first, then growing bolder, eager for more of this truth that resonated so deeply within them. This journey of proclamation was not without its challenges. The roads were long, the elements harsh. Suspicion often met me, especially in Roman territories, where my very presence as a former centurion, speaking of a crucified Jew, could be seen as sedition. But the burning truth within me was a constant source of strength, a light that guided my every step. It was a quieter battle than any I had fought with sword and shield, but infinitely more profound, a battle for the very souls of men and women. And in that quiet, persistent effort, I found a peace deeper than any I had known in the glory of military triumph. As you drift now. Dear listener, let the image of Longinus, the humble evangelist walking those ancient roads, his voice a soft, compelling murmur, lull you into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. Feel the gentle rhythm of his journey, a journey of truth shared, and allow it to carry you into the quiet depths of your own peaceful slumber. The dust of the ancient roads settled softly behind me, just as the dust of my past life had settled from my soul. My footsteps, once heavy with the measured stride of a soldier, now felt lighter, more purposeful, carrying me not towards conquest, but towards connection. You can almost feel that subtle shift, can't you? That gentle recalibration of your inner compass, guiding you towards a quiet fulfillment, far removed from the clamor of ambition. In the regions of Cappadocia, with its surreal landscapes of sculpted rock formations and hidden caves, and in Caesarea, the bustling port city where cultures intertwined like ancient vines, I found hearts ready to listen. They were not always the powerful or the influential, but often the humble, the weary, those who carried unspoken burdens in their everyday lives. They sought something real, something that transcended the fleeting promises of earthly power or the empty rituals of old gods. And to them, I offered not complex theological arguments, but the simple, unvarnished truth of my own experience. My testimony was my most potent tool, more powerful than any sword, more persuasive than any orator's flourish. I was there. I would begin, my voice low, a steady murmur in the quiet gathering. I stood at the foot of the cross. I was the centurion who plunged the spear into his side. Imagine the gasps, the sudden, sharp intake of breath among my listeners. Their eyes, wide with a mixture of disbelief and fascination, would fix on me, waiting. And from that womb, I would continue, my voice gaining a quiet, profound conviction. Came not only blood, but clear water. And in that very instant, the blur that clouded my own eye for years cleared. My sight, both physical and spiritual, was restored. You can almost feel the impact of those words, can't you? The sudden weight of undeniable authenticity. It wasn't merely a story. It was a living truth, breathed into existence by a man who had personally witnessed the impossible. It bypassed their intellects, went straight to the heart, stirring something deep within their souls. I spoke not with fervent shouts, but with a gentle, hypnotic cadence, allowing each word to sink in, like a drop of cool water on parched ground. I spoke of the man's serene dignity, even amidst unspeakable torment. I recounted his words of forgiveness, so utterly alien to the Roman concept of justice, yet so profoundly beautiful. I described the terrifying darkness that had fallen over the land, the shuddering earthquake, the palpable sense of a world holding its breath. These were not tales from distant lands or ancient scrolls. These were the vivid, immediate memories of a man who had been there. A man whose life had been irrevocably cleaved into before and after by those very events. The effect was profound. Many were moved to tears, not of sorrow, but of release, of recognition. They felt a resonance, an echo of truth within their own deepest longings. They came forward, timidly at first, then with growing confidence, their voices hushed, their questions earnest. "Tell us more about this man," they would plead. "How can we know this peace you speak of? How can we find this forgiveness?" And I would guide them gently, patiently, just as the narrative guides you now. I spoke of repentance, of a turning, away from the old ways, and a turning towards the light that had shone so brightly on Golgotha. I explained, in simple terms, the profound love that had driven him to that cross, a love that was offered freely, unconditionally, to all who would. receive it. This was not about building an empire, or conquering lands, or amassing wealth. This was about transforming hearts, one soul at a time. It was a quieter harvest, far from the fields of grain or the nets of fish, but infinitely more precious. Imagine the quiet joy of witnessing such transformations. A hardened merchant finding solace, a grieving widow finding hope, a cynical philosopher finding meaning. Each person whose heart softened, whose eyes lit up with new understanding, was a confirmation of the truth I carried. It was a labor of love, a silent, persistent sowing of seeds in fertile ground, trusting that the gentle hand of grace would bring forth the unseen harvest. And in that service, in that profound act of sharing, I found a purpose more fulfilling than any legionary: triumph. My spirit, once bound by duty, now soared freely, carried on the soft currents of shared faith. As you listen now, let the quiet strength of these transformations, the gentle awakening of hearts in ancient lands, lull you into a state of profound peace. Feel the quiet hum of purpose, the gentle rhythm of shared truth, and allow it to carry you deeper into a restorative, tranquil sleep. The gentle murmurs of acceptance and the quiet blossoming of faith in distant lands were a balm to my soul, a stark contrast to the brutal efficiency of my former life. Yet, in the shadow of this burgeoning truth, another force stirred, insidious and relentless: the vast, unblinking eye of the Roman Empire. You can almost feel its cold, steady gaze, can't you? A power that tolerated no rivals, no unexpected allegiances that might undermine its absolute authority. My growing reputation, whispered from village to village, from marketplace to quiet hearth, inevitably reached the ears of those in power. A former Roman centurion, a man of authority and discipline, now speaking of a crucified king and a new unseen kingdom. This was not merely a philosophical divergence. It was perceived as sedition, a direct challenge to Caesar's supreme rule. The whispers turned to murmurs of suspicion, then to the rustle of official decrees, carried by swift riders across the empire's vast network of roads. I knew this day would come. A part of me, the old centurion, had always anticipated consequence. My life as a soldier had taught me that every action, especially one as profound as abandoning my allegiance to Rome, carried a price. But the price seemed insignificant when weighed against the truth that now burned within me, a flame so fierce it consumed all fear. Imagine the feeling of being hunted, not by an invading army, but by the very system you once served. The subtle shift in glances, the sudden quiet as you entered a town, the knowledge that every shadow might conceal a watchful eye. It was a quieter kind of battle, a war of attrition against an unseen enemy that could strike anywhere, at any time. Yet my resolve remained unshaken. Each whispered warning, each fleeting glimpse of a suspicious figure, only served to strengthen the conviction that I was on the right path, a path illuminated by a light that no earthly power could extinguish. The arrest came eventually. It was inevitable. Perhaps in Cappadocia, amidst the ancient rocks that seemed to whisper secrets of eternity, or perhaps in the bustling streets of Caesarea, where the imperial presence was a constant, undeniable force. The exact moment fades into the timeless quality of memory, but the sensation remains. The cold touch of Roman hands, the familiar clanking of legionary armor, the harsh voices of command, sounds I had once given, now directed at me. You can feel that irony, can't you? The hunter becoming the hunted, the enforcer now the captive. I was brought before Roman authorities, likely a governor or a high-ranking military official. The interrogation began, a ritual of intimidation and coercion designed to break the spirit, to extract a recantation, a public denial of my newfound faith. They questioned my loyalty, my sanity, my motives. "Why have you abandoned your post, centurion?" they would demand, their voices laced with cold authority. "Why do you speak of this Nazarene criminal? Deny him. Reaffirm your loyalty to Caesar." But my tongue, once so readily forming commands and oaths to the emperor, now found its voice in a different truth. My answers were calm, clear, and unwavering. I spoke not with defiance, but with conviction, explaining what I had witnessed, the transformation I had undergone. "I have seen the Son of God," I would say, my voice steady, filled with a quiet power that seemed to disarm their fury, if only. For a moment, my allegiance now lies with him. Imagine the frustration in their eyes, the baffled fury of men accustomed to absolute obedience. They used threats, promises, perhaps even torture, though the memory of such physical pain pales beside the spiritual certainty that sustained me. But there was no breaking. The truth I carried was not a belief that could be extracted or beaten out of me. It was the very essence of my being. The flame that had ignited on Golgotha had grown into an unquenchable fire, burning away all fear, all doubt, leaving behind only unwavering devotion. You see, for some, faith is a gentle comfort. For others, it is a quiet strength. But for me, Longinus, it had become an unbreakable shield, a profound certainty that anchored me in the face of absolute power. The Roman Empire, for all its might, for all its legions and laws, had no weapon against a man who had truly seen the divine, a man whose soul had been set free. And in that unwavering resolve, I found a peace deeper than any rest, a quiet confidence that transcended the impending storm. As you listen now, let the image of Longinus, facing down imperial power with nothing but the truth in his heart, lull you into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. Feel the quiet power of conviction, the gentle strength of unwavering faith, and allow it to carry you deeper into a tranquil, peaceful slumber. The interrogation chamber was a place designed to break men, to strip away their convictions layer by layer, leaving only raw fear and compliance. You can almost feel the chill in the air, the dampness of ancient stone walls, the faint, metallic scent that lingers in places of confinement. But for me, Longinus, the Roman centurion who had once enforced such cold realities, this chamber felt strangely impotent. Their questions, their threats, their attempts to force a denial of my faith seemed to glance off me like arrows against an impenetrable shield. My heart, once a fortress of Roman loyalty, now beat with a different allegiance, an unbreakable rhythm of truth. And my voice, though perhaps weary from the journey and the interrogation, remained clear. "I have seen him," I would repeat, my words a quiet, unwavering confession. "He is the Son of God. My loyalty is to him, now and forever." Imagine the frustration in the eyes of my captors, the subtle tightening of their jaws. They were accustomed to men crumbling, to spirits bending under pressure. But I, Longinus, was not bending. I was rooted, unmovable, anchored to a truth more profound than any empire. They offered temptations, subtle at first, then more overt. Promises of reinstatement, of honors, of a return to the comfort and prestige of my former life. "Think of your rank, centurion," they might have urged, their voices smooth as polished stone. "Think of your pension, your legacy. All this can be yours again, if only you recant. If only you utter a few words of loyalty to Caesar." You can almost feel the seductive pull of such offers, can't you? The allure of safety, of familiar comforts, especially when facing the unknown. But these promises held no appeal for me. My Eyes, once blinded by the glitter of Roman glory, now saw through such fleeting illusions. The true treasure, the true glory, lay elsewhere, in the quiet certainty of the truth I held within. The peace I had found was worth infinitely more than any earthly reward they could offer. When persuasion failed, they resorted to more direct methods, threats. They spoke of pain, of suffering, of a slow, agonizing death. They painted vivid pictures of the torment I would endure if I did not comply. My body, which had known the harsh realities of battle and the precise pain of punishment, understood these threats. A part of my human self, that old physical being, might have recoiled, but my spirit, forged in the fire of Golgotha, remained. Untouched, soaring above the impending storm, I stood firm, not out of stubbornness, but out of absolute conviction. How could I deny what I had seen with my own eyes, what I felt with my own soul? How could I betray the one who had offered such profound forgiveness, such limitless love, even to those who put him to death? The thought was unthinkable. My resolve was absolute. There was no internal debate, no flicker of hesitation. The path was clear, illuminated by an unwavering light. My unwavering testimony, the simple, repeated confession of what I had witnessed and believed, was itself a form of defiance. It was a silent yet powerful testament against their authority, against their gods, against their very understanding of the world. They wanted words of denial, a public spectacle of recantation, to serve as a warning to others. But all they received was a quiet, persistent affirmation of truth. And in that, I found a strength that surprised even myself. This was the final test, not of physical endurance, but of spiritual fortitude. Could I, Longinus, a man of flesh and blood, stand against the might of an empire, armed with nothing but my faith? The answer, whispered from the deepest part of my being, was a resounding yes. The flame ignited on Golgotha had not merely endured the winds of persecution. It had intensified, burning brighter with each challenge, transforming me from a mere witness into an unyielding beacon of truth. And as I stood there, awaiting their final judgment, I felt a profound peace settle over me, a quiet acceptance of whatever lay ahead. My life had been irrevocably changed, and there was no turning back. As you drift now, dear listener, let the quiet strength of unwavering conviction, the gentle power of an unshakable truth, lull you into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. Feel the calm certainty, the gentle rhythm of faith, and allow it to carry you deeper into a tranquil, peaceful slumber. The air in the chamber grew heavier, thick with unspoken judgment. My captors, their faces grim, understood that I would not yield. You can almost feel that moment, can't you? That silent realization when all arguments have failed and only one path remains open. For them, it was the path of brute force, the ultimate assertion of Roman power. For me, it was the path of unwavering truth, the final, supreme act of devotion. They pronounced their judgment. It was swift, cold, and utterly predictable. The sentence for defying Caesar, for abandoning the gods of Rome, for proclaiming a crucified man as the Son of God, was death. And not just any death, but one designed to be a spectacle, a warning to any who might dare to follow in my footsteps. They wanted to break not just my body, but the very spirit of the nascent faith I represented. But as their voices droned on, outlining the grim details of my fate, an incredible peace settled over me. It was not the peace of resignation, but the profound tranquility of absolute certainty. My fear had long since burned away, consumed by the fiery conviction that now resided within my soul. I had witnessed true suffering on Golgotha, suffering endured with dignity and forgiveness. And now, my own impending end seemed a small thing in comparison. Imagine the quiet strength that fills you when you know, with every fiber of your being, that you are walking in truth. That every step you take, even towards your own demise, is a step closer to the divine. There was no terror, no regret, only a profound gratitude for the transformation I had experienced. My life, once defined by the sword and the shield, was now defined by a far greater power, the power of unwavering faith. They led me forth, perhaps to a public square, perhaps to a quiet, secluded place. The specific setting fades into the timeless quality of memory, just as the fleeting details of their cruel instruments now seem insignificant. What remains, what resonates, is the inner stillness, the unwavering focus on the one I had proclaimed. Then, the final act. My head, once crowned with the laurel wreath of a Roman victor, now bowed in humble acceptance. The sharp, cold bite of the executioner's blade. You can almost feel the swiftness of it, the sudden, clean separation. And in that very instant, as life departed, there was no pain, no fear, only a profound sense of release, a soaring freedom. My last breath, a whisper of devotion, joined the timeless chorus of those who had gone before, proclaiming the same. Truth, I died as a martyr, a witness to the truth unto my last breath. My physical journey ended, but my spiritual journey had just truly begun. My death, intended as a suppression, became instead a seed planted in the soil of ancient lands, watered by my blood, destined to sprout and flourish in the hearts of generations yet unborn. The Roman Empire sought to extinguish a flame, but in doing so, they inadvertently spread its embers far and wide. My story, the story of Longinus, the centurion who plunged the spear into the side of the Son of God and found his own redemption. In that very act began to be whispered among the growing communities of believers. It was a testament to the transformative power of divine grace, a beacon of hope in a world still shrouded in shadows. My name, once merely a designation of rank, became a symbol of unwavering faith, of profound conversion, and of courageous witness. And in time, the humble community of believers, growing in number and in strength, recognized me. They remembered my unshakable confession, my ultimate sacrifice. The Church, in its wisdom, would later acknowledge me, a Roman soldier, as Saint Longinus. My legacy became not one of military conquest, but one of spiritual victory, a quiet triumph of truth over tyranny, of grace over judgment. My name, whispered across centuries, continues to serve as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even from the most unexpected places, profound transformation can occur, leading to an eternal, unwavering light. As you drift now, dear listener, let the quiet strength of this ultimate act of faith, this profound peace in the face of destiny, lull you into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. Feel the gentle rhythm of a life transformed, and allow it to carry you deeper into a tranquil, peaceful slumber. The executioner's blade marked not an end, but a beginning. You can almost feel it, can't you? That strange, paradoxical truth, where ultimate sacrifice ignites an even brighter flame. My physical form may have ceased, but my spirit, imbued with an undeniable truth, soared. And the story, the quiet, powerful narrative of Longinus, began to weave itself into the fabric of the fledgling faith. My death, intended by the Roman authorities as a stark warning, a definitive suppression of this new unsettling movement, achieved the very opposite. It became a testament, a seed planted in the fertile, often bloody, soil of ancient lands. Imagine the hushed whispers that would carry my tale from one secret gathering to another, from the hidden catacombs beneath Rome to the sun-baked villages of the East. There was a centurion, they would say, their voices low with reverence, a hardened Roman who stood at the foot of the cross. He saw, he believed, and he chose death over denying the Son of God. This narrative, my personal journey from enforcer to believer, became a beacon of hope for those who were persecuted, for those who wavered in their faith. It showed them that even the most unlikely heart could be touched, that grace could penetrate the thickest armor, and that true allegiance transcended earthly power. It offered courage to the fearful, comfort to the grieving, and a profound sense of validation to those who felt alone in their newfound convictions. You can almost feel that ripple of hope, can't you? That quiet strength that spreads from one soul to another, reinforcing their collective spirit. My name, once merely a designation of rank and authority within the vast, impersonal machinery of the Roman Empire, began to take on a new meaning. Longinus was no longer just a centurion. He was a symbol of transformation, of unwavering faith, of profound conversion. He was the one who had seen, truly seen, and bore witness with his very life. This wasn't about military conquest or earthly glory. It was about spiritual victory, a quiet triumph of truth over tyranny, of grace over judgment. The early communities of believers, scattered yet connected by an unseen bond, remembered my unshakable confession, my ultimate sacrifice. They understood the immense courage it took for a Roman soldier to turn away from the gods of empire and embrace a crucified Jew as divine. They cherished my story as a powerful example of divine intervention and human faithfulness. In their gatherings, in the telling of their sacred stories, my narrative became a crucial piece. It authenticated the events of Golgotha from an unexpected, yet undeniable perspective, that of the very authority that had executed him. My testimony provided a unique lens, a view from within the very system that sought to extinguish the light. And in doing so, it helped to solidify the burgeoning belief in the minds and hearts of countless new converts. This was a subtle, yet profound contribution, not through grand pronouncements or powerful sermons, but through the quiet, persistent echo of my personal experience. It was a legacy built not on monuments of stone, but on the enduring foundation of human hearts touched by truth. And this invisible influence, this quiet shaping of the nascent faith, continued to grow, spreading slowly but surely, like roots reaching deep into the earth, anchoring a mighty tree that would one day overshadow the very empire that sought to crush it. My presence, even in death, remained a powerful, affirming force in the development of the early Christian movement. As you drift now, dear listener, allow the quiet power of this enduring legacy, the gentle spread of faith from a single transformed life, to lull you into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. Feel the calm certainty, the gentle rhythm of a story that transcends time, and allow it to carry you deeper into a tranquil, peaceful slumber. The whispers of my story, carried on the gentle currents of faith, did not merely fade into the air. They settled, quietly yet firmly, into the very bedrock of the burgeoning Christian movement. You can almost feel it, can't you? That subtle transformation, where personal narrative becomes shared history, where a single life contributes to the tapestry of a burgeoning belief system. My journey from a Roman centurion to a martyr for Christ was not just a tale of individual redemption. It became a powerful, undeniable argument in itself. As the years turned into decades, and the small, scattered communities of believers grew into a more organized, yet still often persecuted church, my story found its place. It wasn't simply a casual anecdote. It was a testament, a piece of crucial evidence that resonated deeply within the hearts of those grappling with the profound claims of this new faith. Imagine the early Christian scholars, the humble scribes, diligently recording the narratives of those who had witnessed the divine. My account, from the unique perspective of an outsider who became an insider, held immense weight. My status as a Roman centurion, a man of authority and a direct participant in the crucifixion, gave my testimony an undeniable gravitas. In a world where Roman power was absolute, where the very act of crucifixion was a definitive statement of imperial might, my conversion spoke volumes. It showed that even the instruments of imperial power could be touched by the divine, that grace could penetrate the thickest armor of worldly authority. This wasn't about converting the weak or the marginalized. It was about transforming the strong, the disciplined, the very enforcers of the old order. My story became an encouragement to those who faced persecution, a quiet strength for those who felt doubt. If a man like Longinus, who stood at the very epicenter of the crucifixion and was charged with its execution, could be so utterly transformed, then surely their own struggles and uncertainties could be overcome. It offered a profound example of the universality of God's grace, that it extended beyond race, beyond social status, beyond former loyalties, reaching even into the heart of an empire's servant. You see, the church, in its infancy, relied heavily on the personal accounts of witnesses. And what a witness I was! Not a disciple who followed him from the beginning, not a family member bound by ties of blood, but an objective, albeit initially hardened, observer whose transformation was as public as the event itself. My piercing of his side, intended as a final act of death, became, ironically, an act of revelation, confirming not just his demise, but his divine nature through the miraculous flow of blood and water. This narrative, my conversion and subsequent martyrdom, became part of the broader hagiography, the sacred stories of saints that the early church compiled and cherished. It was taught, retold, and reflected upon in the hushed gatherings, providing both inspiration and validation for the faithful. My name, Saint Longinus, was spoken with reverence, not as a mythological figure, but as a real man whose tangible encounter with the divine had irrevocably altered his life and, by extension, profoundly influenced the burgeoning Christian narrative. My journey from the dust of Golgotha to the quiet sanctity of martyrdom provided a powerful, enduring testament to the reality of the events of the crucifixion and the transformative power of faith. It was a story that transcended mere belief, rooted as it was in undeniable first-hand experience. And through the centuries, my legacy has endured, a quiet whisper of truth in the grand halls of history, reminding all who listen that true sight often comes from the most unexpected places. As you drift now, dear listener, let the quiet strength of this enduring legacy, the gentle echo of truth in hallowed halls, lull you into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. Feel the calm certainty, the gentle rhythm of a story that transcends time, and allow it to carry you deeper into a tranquil, peaceful slumber. The story of Longinus, the Roman centurion, did not merely exist as a footnote in ancient texts or a hushed whisper among early believers. It possessed an enduring resonance, a quality that allowed it to transcend time and geography, finding its way into the very heart of Western culture. You can almost feel that gentle ripple, can't you? The subtle yet persistent influence of a single life echoing through centuries, shaping thoughts, inspiring art, and coloring perceptions. As the centuries unfolded, and Christianity, once a persecuted sect, grew to become a dominant force, the figure of Longinus was remembered, honored, and often depicted. Imagine him, not just in the stark reality of Golgotha, but in the vibrant colors of medieval stained glass windows, in the intricate carvings of ancient cathedrals, and in the profound brushstrokes of Renaissance masters. Artists, poets, and playwrights found inspiration in his dramatic conversion, seeing in him a universal archetype, the hardened heart opened by truth, the skeptic transformed by grace. His story resonated because it spoke to a fundamental human experience, the possibility of profound change, even in the most unlikely of individuals. It affirmed that no one was beyond redemption, no one too hardened, too cynical, too deeply entrenched in the ways of the world to be touched by something greater. This was a comforting thought, a powerful message of hope that whispered across generations, assuring people that light could penetrate even the deepest darkness, and that sight could be found even by those who had been blind. Think of the quiet moments of contemplation, of prayer, when individuals throughout history pondered the story of Golgotha. Longinus was there, a tangible link, a relatable figure amidst the divine mystery. He was the human element, the witness whose transformation made the miraculous more accessible, more real. His act of piercing the side, initially a grim duty, transformed into a symbolic gesture of revelation, opening the way for the outpouring of grace. And the restoration of his sight became a powerful metaphor for spiritual enlightenment, a theme that has permeated countless spiritual traditions. You see, the tales of saints and martyrs served not only as historical accounts, but as moral and spiritual guides. Longinus, the centurion, offered a particular kind of guidance. He demonstrated radical obedience to a higher calling, even when it meant defying earthly powers. He exemplified the courage required to stand for truth, regardless of the personal cost. His unwavering faith in the face of persecution provided a blueprint for resilience, a quiet strength for those who would face their own trials. His presence in sacred art and literature served as a constant, gentle reminder of these profound truths. His spear, sometimes depicted as a sacred relic, became known as the Holy Lance, an object imbued with spiritual significance, symbolizing the ultimate fulfillment of prophecy and the opening of a new covenant. Even today, the image of Longinus and his spear remains a powerful icon, instantly recognizable, whispering its timeless tale of conversion and witness. The story of Longinus, therefore, is not confined to the pages of history. It lives on, an enduring echo, a gentle presence in our collective consciousness. It reminds us that truth can manifest in the most unexpected places, that profound change is always possible, and that even a small act of witness can have an immeasurable, lasting impact on the world. It's a testament to the power of a moment, a single afternoon on a desolate hill, to transform not just a man, but the very trajectory of human belief. As you drift now, dear listener, allow the gentle echo of this timeless tale, the quiet influence of a profound transformation across the ages, to lull you into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. Feel the calm certainty, the gentle rhythm of enduring truth, and allow it to carry you deeper into a tranquil, peaceful slumber. So we come to the gentle close of our story, a journey through the transformation of a man named Longinus, a Roman centurion whose life was irrevocably altered on a desolate hill outside Jerusalem. You've walked with him through his initial skepticism, felt the weight of his duty, witnessed the profound, unsettling dignity of the condemned man, and experienced the cosmic upheaval of that extraordinary afternoon. You've journeyed with him through his unwavering confession, his courageous martyrdom, and the quiet, persistent spread of his unique testimony through the nascent Christian world. His story, as you now know, transcends the simple facts of history. It's a testament to the power of a single moment to redefine an entire existence. It's a quiet whisper that echoes through the grand halls of time, reminding us that even the most hardened hearts can be touched. That light can pierce the deepest darkness, and that profound truth can emerge from the most unexpected places. The Roman Empire, in its immense power, sought to extinguish a fledgling flame, but in doing so, it inadvertently scattered embers that would ignite hearts for centuries to come. Longinus, the centurion who plunged the spear, became the witness, whose very sight was restored, both physically and spiritually. He is remembered not for his military conquests, but for his profound conversion, his unwavering faith, and his ultimate sacrifice. His name, once a symbol of earthly authority, became and remains a beacon of spiritual victory. The Church, in its wisdom, honored him, elevating him to Saint Longinus, ensuring that his unique journey of faith would be cherished and retold through the ages. His enduring legacy resonates deeply within Western culture, weaving itself into the very fabric of our shared consciousness. You see his echoes in art, from the vivid canvases of masters depicting the crucifixion to the intricate sculptures and stained glass windows in ancient cathedrals, where he stands as a silent sentinel of transformation. His story inspires literature, providing a powerful archetype of redemption and unwavering conviction. It touches upon profound themes in psychology, exploring the sudden radical shifts in human perception and belief. And it subtly permeates popular culture in countless narratives of heroes and villains who find unexpected paths to truth or redemption. The tale of Longinus serves as a timeless reminder that true understanding often comes from witnessing, truly witnessing with an open heart. It speaks to the possibility of radical change within ourselves, encouraging us to look beyond the obvious, to listen to the whispers of truth, even when they challenge everything we thought we knew. It assures us that faith, born of genuine encounter, can empower us to face any challenge, any persecution, with a peace that transcends earthly understanding. This quiet journey with Longinus into the depths of history and the human spirit now draws to a close. I hope it has offered you a moment of profound calm, a space for gentle reflection, and a path towards restorative sleep. If this journey has touched you, if the whispers of this ancient tale have brought you peace, consider joining our community. We invite you to subscribe to our channel for more stories designed to soothe your mind and guide you to tranquility. And please share your thoughts, your feelings, your quiet reflections in the comments below. Your connection completes this journey. Until our next story, rest deeply, sleep soundly,